Hello there. The EU27 has agreed to tighten the bloc's external borders, and this could well be of great benefit to the UK. The EU Council of Ministers agreed yesterday a way forward to strengthen the bloc's external borders. A move designed to identify legitimate asylum seekers early at the border and turn away those that do not qualify. And it has a couple of very interesting components. Now, we're often told that asylum seekers can wander the world at will until they get to the place they want to live in and then claim asylum there. Well, the EU is going to turn that one on its head with a new asylum seeker regulation, and EU regulations must be obeyed by member states. It's the top tier of their lawmaking process, and once in force, it becomes directly and immediately applicable in all member states. And what this new regulation will do once it becomes law is to set obligations for asylum seekers to apply for asylum in the member states of first entry or legal stay. And it also sets out clear obligations to the asylum seeker to cooperate with the authorities right the way through the whole process. One would think then that those who turn up with no documentation or other proof would find themselves in a sticky situation when making such an application. The new regs will also introduce EU-wide mandatory procedures to quickly assess a claim at the EU external border to see whether applications are unfounded or inadmissible. And it also puts responsibilities on member states to return illegally staying third country nationals and to prevent irregular migration in the first place, and prevent unauthorised movements of third country nationals and stateless persons between the member states. As far as I can see, all of this is a massive sea change, given what's been going on up until now. A sea change that could benefit the UK. But at the same time, the EU is loosening up the definition of family. This will become: the definition of family should therefore include families formed outside the country of origin but before their arrival on the territory of the member state. This is due to the amount of time people spend travelling to get to the EU and the likelihood of them forming new relationships or having children on the way. But another reason given by the EU is that this limited and targeted enlargement of the scope of the definition is expected to reduce the incentive for some unauthorised movements of asylum seekers within the EU. So, if one asylum seeker forms a family with a third country national, then wants to move to another member state and gets permission, that family won't qualify to move states with them. Now, if all of that is implemented properly, we could well see a rapid decline in the number of channel crossings once the new regulations are in place, as it would presumably require the police to take action in the camps on the EU coast near to the UK and deal with the occupants properly. Now, this will cost a lot of money, take a lot of personnel, and could put immense pressure on member states like Italy and Greece. So the EU27 have agreed between them to form a system of solidarity contributions, which could take a number of forms. These contributions include relocation, financial contributions, or alternative solidarity measures such as deployment of personnel or measures focusing on capacity building, says the EU Council press release. And part of that is that member states either agree to take 30,000 asylum seekers a year or pay €20,000 in some form or other for every one of the 30,000 they don't take in. So if a member state does not take any asylum seekers, they have to put the equivalent of €600 million into the Solidarity Fund. But no member state will be forced to take in asylum seekers. And these new regulations are designed to replace the Dublin Agreement. Now, the FT is saying that these new regs will also allow EU member states more leeway for sending failed asylum seekers to safe third countries. Wonder what the open border lefties will think about that one. In fact, I wonder what they think about the EU strengthening its borders. Anyway, it's now up to the EU Commission to draft the requisite regulation and get it through the process. And one assumes that will take some time. And it's during that time that the people traffickers will be trying to make as much hay as possible. And the galling thing is that it is most likely going to be a Labour government that benefits from this when the Channel crossings start drying up, with no input from them at all. Now, many people will say that if all EU member states are signed up to the ECHR in exactly the same way that the UK is, then why can't the UK do the same sort of things? Or even, why don't we ask to be involved? We could pay in and help the EU out a bit, maybe. But the problem here is that the EU as a body is not signed up to the ECHR. It is not a member of the Council of Europe. And as I understand it, under EU treaty law, nothing that flows from the treaties and institutions of the EU can be referred to the European Courts of Human Rights. They have to go through their national courts and then be referred to the EU's European Court of Justice if necessary. Now, the EU says that the ECJ follows ECHR rulings, so it makes no difference. To which my answer is, then sign up to the ECHR today. But the EU shows no sign of doing so. But this might make it a bit of a legal minefield for the UK to get involved, because it's inevitable that the UK would be taken in front of the European Courts of Human Rights and get hammered there. But EU member states wouldn't be hammered in the ECJ for doing much the same thing while obeying EU law. Oh, and by not being in the EU or involved in this, the UK is not obliged to take in 30,000 applicants or pay nearly 600 million quid for the privilege. Although I'm convinced that there will be many MPs and lords out there who would be more than willing to get a law through to force us to do so. Now, there's been a lot of talk about people wanting to go back into the EU, but I'm not sure a requirement to follow these rules will help that particular cause. That's probably why much of the UK press seems to have overlooked it. Now, one would like to think that one big beneficiary of all of this will be the UK, with reduced pressure on our border force and the RNLI. As long as the EU stays on top of all of this, of course. And that it could lead to the freeing up of lots of hotel space. But there's one or two organisations that won't be too pleased about that. And Serco, for one, springs to mind. And maybe some hotel owners casting about for hospitality sector workers. Wonder how quickly people will go for those jobs, given how quickly they were dumped in favour of government cash to house asylum seekers in the first place. And then there's all our lefty open borders types in the Lib Dems and Labour. Care for Calais might find themselves sat in camps all on their own. So let's all of us in the UK wish the EU every luck in this endeavour. But a few words of caution. Those people smugglers out there will be looking for fresh routes. They will never let go of such a lucrative trade. So it's a good job there's no corruption in the various EU member state authorities that could facilitate them. Isn't it?